Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, it is Friday, the 21st of January, 2022. It is crazy to say that because it's 22 years into the Millennium, and I remember when the Millennium seemed like the far future, but now obviously distant past, depending on your perspective. I have some things to talk about today, but as always, you may notice a slight difference in my tone. I am slightly, just ever so slightly inebriated as we're starting with one of my companies, sort of team kind of happy hour by Zoom. And I gotta tell you, I was not expecting to like it, and it seemed to go pretty well. So the guy that I have running, or my co-founder who I have running that company, is gonna set up something where sent like a drink package to everybody, and like a kit basically to make a drink. Make the drink, you do the Zoom, and we just did some kind of icebreakers, and I was gonna say 20 questions, but it was a would you rather, a little bit of that. I liked it. I think it was actually surprisingly good. I'm looking forward to us doing it again. And if you have not tried something like that and you have a distributed team, shockingly good. Not a bad idea. I'm amazed that it worked. I wonder if our team got much bigger, if it would, like how well does it scale? But for now, we're like 5-6 people. Seems to work really well. And hopefully by the end of the year, it'll still be more than twice the size, but manageable. At least that's the hope. So anyway, one of the things I wanted to talk about today was actually the press secretary, and in particular, and this is just, it will shock you, surely, that this is coming from some interactions I had on Twitter, but I see regularly she says something, and whatever it is something just like outrageously out of touch. In the case of today, it was basically like she was on The View and she's just kind of laughing about like, oh, haha, if obviously the world is stressful, just have some margaritas and go do some kickboxing and this kind of stuff. And yeah, I get that. I definitely, I had a drink today. It helps. It makes me feel good. But how many people have a job, first of all, where they can do that? And also, how many people, like, I understand that, like, she has not had this in her experience, but I have had periods in my life. I've been relatively privileged, to be clear. I don't want to say that I have come anywhere near having it as hard as some people. But I've had periods in my life where going out for a drink was just not feasible. I had a couple credit cards, but they were completely full. And it was basically like, the situation I was in at a point, not all that many years ago, was occasionally like, oh, am I even gonna be able to have lunch today? Am I gonna be able to eat? It was not a position where you could go, just go to the gym, because you have a membership to that, and do some kickboxing or whatever. It was not like, oh, get a margarita, because a margarita, even a cheap one, like it's $5. Doesn't sound like much when you're making a decent amount of money. But when you're living month to month or worse, like the situation I was in, we just had no income coming in for a couple months. And I didn't have a lot of space on my credit cards. I was living on them, and that gets tapped out. And then you're just like, you're fucked. You're basically like, what the fuck do I do? Literally the only reason that I was able to continue and push through that and get to the point where now I have a few businesses and some employees is because I had a sister who was very helpful and had some money. I had a little bit of money going in, and I am just ridiculously, absurdly stubborn and just kind of like gritted through it. And some people would say, well, okay, so you can do it. You could. No, don't fucking recommend that to people. Like, I could do it because I was single. I had no kids. I was in a position where it was just me, and like things were not great, but I could just like power through it. And even then it was hard. There are a lot of people who are working 40, 60, 80 hours a week, one or multiple jobs, and they're just scraping by. They're just like barely covering their nut, barely able to pay their bills. And they don't have any elasticity in that. Like, any kind of small thing goes wrong and they're fucked. Like their tire, you blow a tire. Now, if I blow a tire, it's annoying, it's inconvenient, but I have insurance, I have credit cards, and I have savings right now. I have money, like I can use a debit card and pay for that. I could use a credit card and pay for that. I have insurance and that can pay for that. If you're in a position where you don't have those things, you're like that, blowing that tire could put you in dire straits. Or if you're in a position where you have like a couple $100 a month that you can kind of play with, you imagine like, okay, you get the cheap, shitty tires that don't work nearly as well and are less efficient and fuck up your fuel economy, and they're heavy and they're loud and all this stuff. And even then, it puts you in a bad position. Or you just don't have a car that works. Yeah. And you imagine also, like, the thing that I don't think people appreciate, and I certainly know that the press secretary doesn't appreciate this, the viewers don't appreciate this. People are in a position where, like, if they're just like, if you're just threading the needle, like you have like living month to month in the truest sense, like you barely have any excess income at all. And it's not because you're spending, like you have spending that you could cut. You could like, oh, stop eating a little bit. You're eating as cheaply as you practically can. You're spending as little as you practically can. And then anything gets fucked up. Like your car breaks down. And of course, if you're in that position, you probably don't have a new car. You probably don't have insurance or great insurance for it. You probably don't have a warranty. So if your car gets fucked up, like it sucks. Even if you have a warranty and have money, your car gets fucked up and it takes like a week or two to fix it. Then I have insurance. I have decent insurance now. So if that happens to me, I am annoyed because I have to take the car out someplace. I have to schedule it. I have to go to the rental car place and get another car, and then I have to put gas in it, which, can you fucking imagine? And you think about that, it's annoying, but it's not devastating. If you're in that position, and a lot of people are, you have anything go wrong with your car, and again, it happens frequently, and now it's not just going to knock on for this month, but several months, maybe many months down the line, you are in a shittier position. And also the person that's in that position, like maybe if you're lucky, you have some room on your credit card, but you have high interest rates on your credit card. So you're putting a little bit of money there. You can't pay it off for a long time. And you're paying, 20, 25, I think it can go up to like 29% interest now, which is really usury kind of rate. But you can have a ridiculously high interest rate. You're paying the minimums now and you have no more elasticity. And you're just paying that indefinitely, or you're paying like multiple times, several times what it actually cost because you didn't have cash reserves. And it's not through a fault of your own. It's just you're not in the position to do that. People are like, the disconnect between people. Yeah, the sort of Marie Antoinette kind of idea, which is where I would put Jen and frankly, the whole administration. Like, Biden is supposed to be the sort of practical, like, oh, he's not like a Pelosi where you've got like hundreds of millions of dollars. He's like, even so, he's at a government job that's paid like almost $200K per year, gave him 3 months off per year. I was just, if you're in Europe, getting 5 weeks off is pretty standard, which to Americans sounds insane. I know people who get, maybe if they're lucky, 2 weeks. And if they try to take those 2 weeks at a time, they'll either get fired or reprimanded. It's like 2 weeks, but you can't really take them all. In Europe, you get 5 weeks, which is pretty nice. And you have decent maternity leave and paternity leave and all these things. In Congress, you get a fucking quarter. Like literally, they can take about 3 months off a year. They still get paid 174K. They still get health insurance that's better than most people have. And even though they are paying for it a little bit, kind of, they have plenty of money for it. And, you know, I'm sorry for the helicopter. It annoys the shit out of me. I'm definitely not going to edit that out. And again, apologies. I just don't have time. I had 3 of these backed up. I pushed them out a couple days ago. But it takes a ridiculous amount of time to do these things, despite appearances. Anyway, you know, I always am very impressed by the people who put in a lot of production value to their things, and especially like you look at one like I love Everything Wrong With CinemaSins. They do. I mean, now they have a team, but it used to just be 2 guys, like 2 friends. And I don't know, probably not Final Cut. I think it was Adobe Premiere. But whatever the fuck they're using that. And you think about it, like, and they had jobs. Like, they weren't just like guys with a shit ton of free time and a lot of disposable income. You're in a position where you can kind of, and yeah, you could do it, but it's a lot of work. And it's shocking. Like, and that was to make a like 5-minute video. I'm making these things. I'm not really doing too much production, but it still takes a lot of time. It's stunning. Anyway, though, I don't want to blather on too much about this, but it is, you know, there was a whole thing before the election that, you know, like Trump would lose, and then all of the sort of wine moms, to use a kind of pejorative, would go back to their mimosa lunches, their brunches, and just kind of fuck off. And a lot of people kind of mocked and derided people who were saying shit like that, but the thing is, it's fucking true. There are a ton of people who are, I hate to use the word bourgeoisie because, you know, but it's really like people who are in a position where they really, you know, they're not like wealthy by any means or stretch of the imagination, but they have enough disposable income that they really don't need to worry too much about a lot of stuff. I would be probably myself in that position right now. You know, I can go flying. If I told you, like, I mean, imagine I'm telling people, you know, when I get stressed out, one thing I like to do is go flying, because that's an option for a lot of people. I like that one better than the drinking, because the drinking, it's harder to understand that there are a lot of people that can't afford that margarita, especially a decent one. But when you're talking about like flying, people get, you know, okay, that's a little extravagant, right? And if you start telling people like, oh, just go flying, why don't you just take like a week vacation at a spa, or go out to Fiji for a week, or rent a private island for, I mean, when people start throwing shit around like this, I think it gets to the point. And that, as absurd as the flying may sound, that's how far from the realm of possibility, even just drinking, and especially the kickboxing, like a gym is a massive luxury, something like that. And yeah, if you're watching or listening to this, you probably can do that. I could do that if I wanted to. I do have like not a ton of time, but if I wanted to make time for it, I could juggle things around. I could probably go kickboxing. Yeah, and I do occasionally go have a margarita. I like that. I'm not a huge fan of alcohol, but once every couple of weeks, I'll go do that. And I enjoy it. It's not bad. But it's also a thing that I'm very cognizant of is a bit of a luxury compared to where a lot of people are. And you just get this impression that so many people are completely unaware of the situation that a lot of people are in. I mean, and I think this is part of why, like you see people who are like, oh, you people who want like $2,000 a month, you're just asking for people to give you money and just throw money. No, a lot of people need fucking money right now. And also a lot of people, like the situation that we're in, people don't have sick time, right? Or they have a finite amount of sick time, PTO or whatever the fuck they call it. If you get COVID, as many people do right now, because it's fucking, this Omicron thing is serious, you get that. Actually, my flight instructor, he got it. And I didn't want to fly with him for a couple weeks. I didn't want to fly with him last week. He was very nice to actually tell me, yeah, actually, it was even better than he tested positive. He was saying like, had a negative test, but had COVID-ish symptoms. So maybe passed on it that week. And then last week, this past week, we were going to go again for a night flight, night IFR. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm still, like, I lost the sense of taste and I had a positive test. And I was like, you know, I'm gonna wait until you have a negative test, because even that is not completely guaranteed, but a negative test, we're gonna be in a plane together. Like, even if I was wearing an N95, yeah, the plane has vents and it's not like you're just breathing recirculated air, but it's also like a tiny little cabin. And I don't really want to, like, IFR for me, like flying for me, is a luxury and it's kind of like a fun little hobby. It's not something that I need to do. And it just seems dumb to take that risk. But the thing is, I also feel bad about it because I know, like, he's, I don't know how old he is exactly, but he's like in his low 20s. Probably not getting paid that much. Probably doesn't have a ton of money socked away. And I'm guessing he doesn't have sick time. I think he gets paid basically like hourly per customer. And you know, you think about it and you're like, okay, well, imagine the position it puts people in. Like, he is trying to do the right thing, but he's kind of getting punished for it. If he would have lied to me and just not said that he had COVID, I would have gotten exposed. I might have gotten it, but he would have at least gotten paid. And yeah, I mean, you just think about how it should just be a given. In fact, it should be just as a matter of public health and independent of the fucking pandemic. As a matter of public health, if you're sick, you should have mandatory sick time, mandatory paid sick time. Then by that I mean you have to not come to work. You could, I guess if you want to work from home, you could do it, but pretty much stay home, get paid for it, you know, come back when you feel better and when you're healthier and when you're not contagious. But until then, you know, and there should be support for that too. Like, obviously, we are really good at paying people. I mean, we had a guy who no longer works for us for other reasons, but he got COVID and was out for like 2.5 weeks, and we paid him for that time. I still am a little bit bitter about it because not that I love the fact that we can actually offer like paid time like that. I don't love the fact that this dude didn't get vaccinated. I like the guy personally, but Jesus. Didn't get vaccinated, was out playing hockey with a bunch of friends, and one of his friends, who he was playing hockey with, unmasked of course, works at a car dealership, unmasked of course, knew that he was sick, didn't just incidentally get sick and not realize it. He wasn't like asymptomatic. He fucking knew he was sick, and he went out and played hockey, which is a completely optional recreational thing. It's not like you have to play fucking hockey. Went out, played hockey with all these other people, all these friends, and got literally everybody in the group sick, including my friend slash former employee and his wife, who was pregnant at the time, and a bunch of other fucking people. And I mean, like, you just look at that and you're like, Jesus fuck people. Like, take the fuck care of yourself. And also, like, why, when it's not necessary, why do that? Yeah, I understand, like, you have to go to work because, again, you have no paid sick time, or your paid sick time is shitty, or you don't have enough. That sucks, but at least there's some kind of, like, impetus for it. This was just, like, playing hockey, like a little recreational bullshit. And you go out and you get a bunch of people sick. And then, of course, you do that and you get people sick, and now they can't fucking play hockey for a few weeks. And, I mean, he was in the 80s on his pulse ox, at least. Maybe when he got a pulse ox. Probably was a little bit lower, I would guess. Really struggling to breathe, really in not great shape. And came back like, I don't know, he was out for like 2.5 weeks. Came back and was like in the meetings, but really not there for another week or two. And you just like, I mean, it's kind of infuriating, honestly. Like, I don't really get infuriated for the most part, but I mean, you sit there and you're like, Jesus fuck, dude. Like, why are you doing, we're being really nice to you, doing, like, offering this thing. Why are you fucking us by doing that? And why are you fucking yourself? Like, by putting yourself in the position where you're gonna get this. And also, like, if this dude was my friend who knew he was sick and got me sick, he wouldn't be my fucking friend anymore. I gotta say, like, I mean, you know, I understand you got time and experience and like history together, but Jesus, somebody got me sick knowingly, unnecessarily. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's fucking infuriating. But anyway, the thing I wanted to talk about today, slightly pandemic related, or at least a sliver of it is expectations. And I've probably done expectations before. I'll probably do it again. But I wanted to talk about expectations mainly because I think a lot about people wearing masks. I think a lot about, like, why is it such a big deal for some people to wear a mask? And I'm convinced, and I understand there are many, many reasons for this. I am convinced that two massive factors, two big fucking things, are A, people, and I know this sounds stupid, but people literally just don't know how to get a fucking mask. You know, now maybe they could figure it out if they cared enough to try, but if you sent them masks, I think a lot of people would just fucking wear the masks. I think a lot of people didn't wear masks early on, especially because they just didn't know how to get one. It was annoying for me to get them. And I have, yeah, I mean, like, I have my sister, I have connections, I have the motivation to do it, and it was still annoying. You know, you imagine, like, you're kind of like not that excited about it to begin with, and there's a little hurdle, you're just not going to do it. And especially if you're sitting there, like, you have some friends who'll give you cover and go like, don't want to wear a mask, you're just going to be a chicken shit and wear a mask. Yeah, I mean, no. And the other thing I think is also kind of expectations. When you go to a culture where they just expect that you'll respect and care about other people, for example, Japan or many Asian cultures are like this. They have kind of a community view. And so you get a lot of compliance with the masks. Not perfect by any means, but it's much better. You get a lot of people who are like, I mean, it's just like a general feeling with people. It's one of the things that I really don't like here or in many European cultures, just that there's a lot of non-interest in like helping other people. A lot of people just, you know, basically are kind of all for yourself, and you know, you're not interested in even being minorly inconvenienced to help somebody else. It's annoying. It's not a thing that I like, respect, admire, appreciate. I think it's terrible, honestly. But I do think that, you know, like this sense of expectation. If all these MAGA people who are not wearing masks, and also it's not just MAGA fucking people. You know, I know people who listen and watch this who don't wear masks, or at least like they'll wear them, but they're like, you know, kind of don't really want to, and I don't feel like it. Yeah, and even I'll walk in my neighborhood and I don't wear one because I'm, you know, I kind of like way out of my way to avoid people. Not that it's perfect by any means, because when you think about like aerosols, I talk about this a lot, but you know, like smoke particles are very, very tiny. Aerosol particles are bigger, but still tiny enough that, you know, like if you could smell smoke, you'd probably you'd probably get exposed to stuff that's in other larger, but still not huge aerosols. And, you know, they're carried almost as far. And it's one of these things, like you see people, they're like, oh, well, you know, it's the same thing that I remember in middle school, the lab thing where it was, is dilution a solution to pollution? And they had, it was one of the more stunning, it's kind of sad how simple it is, but one of the more memorable demos that I've seen in my life. They had a big jug, and in that jug there were like a couple crystals, you couldn't even see, of potassium permanganate. Can't even see it. And then they pour water in it, clear water, and it turns purple. It's like brilliant violet color, and it fills up the whole thing, and it's purple. And you're like, whoa, that's kind of magical. And then he pours out like 2/3 of it or most of it, and then fills it up, and it's still purple. And it's kind of, it left a fucking impression on me. Like, you know, it shows you, I mean, obviously it is more dilute and it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's in there. And you think about it, like, this is for a chemical or some kind of contaminant where your, like, the effect that that's going to have on you is based on the dosage that you would take. Not that potassium permanganate is all that toxic, but like if it was something toxic, you know, it gives you an impression of like what you're doing to yourself, especially if it's something that's really not good for you, even in small quantities. And so that's that. And then you think about, and that's without like biological magnification or, you know, things like this of DDT or dioxin or whatever. You have that. And then you also have simultaneously this idea that, well, okay, you can dilute virus quite a bit, but all it takes is one active virion that's capable of, you know, competent to infect, causes an infection, and yeah, you will be sicker if you get exposed to a shit ton of it, because you'll have all these colonies starting in a bunch of different places, they're all going, and then your immune system will eventually catch up to it, maybe, if it's lucky, but there's some lag, yeah. Versus you get one, it's like, okay, there's a colony, now it starts replicating and expanding into the nearby cells. It's slower, right? It's still exponential growth, but it doesn't start from as large of an N. And so your immune system has a little bit more time to catch up to it because you have to wait more generations to get to where you were before. But it's not, you know, all it really takes is the one to get you sick. And then you think, okay, well, yeah, there is diffusion, there is dilution as you get further from somebody who's breathing, but it really doesn't take that much. Yeah, and I don't know, this is a thing that, it's one of the things that I get irritated with some people about, because they're like, oh, well, if you're outside and it's well ventilated, then you can just kind of like be there unmasked, and it's no big deal. It's like, maybe, yeah, if you're lucky. I wouldn't gamble on it. I wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't assume for sure. Anyway, it's just an interesting thing. So to me, I really do think, like, most people, it's funny because you have people who are like, their whole identity is nonconformism. It's kind of like that South Park episode where you had the kids that were nonconformists that were all in the, I think they were emo kids or something like that, but they're all like conforming to the nonconformal cult, essentially. The people who sit there and they're like, oh, I'm not a conformist. They all have the giant white truck. They all have the gun rack. They all have the piss on Obama sticker and, you know, all of this stuff. A whole fucking cultural ensemble bullshit that goes along with the stuff that they think they're not conforming to. And instead, yeah, they're conforming to their own sort of culture. Not wearing a mask, not getting vaccinated, that is conforming. And like for them, for me, not wearing a mask, like I would have people talking to me or looking at me weird at least. But for these people, not wearing a mask, they just, yeah. In fact, for them, if they were wearing a mask, they'd have like, Bob, what are you doing? What are you doing, Bob? Why are you wearing a mask? Oh my God. You know, no, it's not. It's just like, that is the expectation, and expectations really guide us in a very serious and strong way. I mean, like, I think about this a lot, but both of my parents had advanced degrees. My mom had a JD, or has a JD. She's retired. And my dad had a, what is it? Master's in, wasn't an MBA. Wasn't an MBA. Some kind of business master's specializing in financial controls. I can't even remember what it was. It's really sad. But, you know, not PhDs, but still advanced degrees. And for my sister and I growing up, it wasn't like they were giving us pressure. It wasn't like, oh, you got to go to grad school. You know, never, I don't think I ever heard either of my parents say anything like that. It was just matter of fact, like, that's just what you do. Like, it was not even a question. It's just like, yeah, of course, that's what you do. And it wasn't like I felt, you know, boxed in and like, oh God, I got to do this horrible thing that I don't want to do. It's like, yeah, that's literally just what you do. You go to grade school, middle school, high school, undergrad, grad school, and then you maybe go out and do something. And if you want to go back and you're middle age someplace, why not? It's totally optional. Those are the expectations that I had set. And not even expectations, but in this case, it was just like, that's just like what people do. It's kind of funny how much, and I'm not trying to make excuses for Jen because, kind of fuck her, and fuck the people that are also like super supportive of someone like this. Also the people who are like very invested in like, oh no, we need to add this full context clip of, whether it's her or Biden, like they'll say something shitty. And then somebody comes rushing in. They're like, oh, it's not cool that you just shared that little excerpt of this thing. And yeah, it is true. It is definitely true. Like, you didn't build that. Sometimes excerpts really do change without context. Obama's, if you have a small business, you didn't build that, sounds very different than if you have a small business, you didn't build the infrastructure that made your small business possible, which is what he was saying. Context really matters there. In the case of Jen here, in the case of Biden video that I saw like last week, that somebody else also came in and they're like, oh, it so matters the context. No, it didn't. I watched the fucking videos. I watched the full length of both. And, it's not just these two. It's like I see it is a regular thing. And it kind of fucking annoys me, actually, because it's like, it goes back to the Romney thing. It's like, oh, that whole thing where people are claiming that he had his dog on the roof of his car for like 8 hours. Here's the full context of that. And then you're like, well, yeah, okay, that is the context of that. But the context of that does not change the fact that he had his fucking dog on the fucking roof of his fucking car for 8 hours. Yeah, I mean, what she said, it's there. It's like, the context doesn't manipulating that. It's not making it better. It's not like she was doing a bit. It's not like, it's like, oh, just have a margarita. Ha ha ha. Yeah, I mean, what she was saying is essentially coming from a point of privilege and also a complete ignorance of that privilege, of the reality of how asymmetric it is between where you are and where other people are. And that is, I think, the real crux of why it's such a fucking terrible thing. And it's also why it annoys the shit out of me. Because I more than most people, I really give a shit about context. I really care about this kind of stuff. I really, I think I'm a big believer in bullshit detectors and look at the full context of the thing, all of this. But when you're throwing out context as if it's like some kind of magical salve that you can just put on any situation and it makes it okay, it doesn't. It fucking doesn't. So anyway, that's, yeah. Now, I have to leave in like an hour and a half or so. I want to go for a walk, mainly because I just, kind of feel the need to walk. But with that, I always appreciate you watching or listening. It's kind of funny, I had one of these I guess it's like a couple weeks now ago, but it was like 2 hours. This one's probably like 30, 40 minutes. Yeah, there's no consistency. It's not, I don't have any way to, it's kind of frustrating actually in some sense. I can't really moderate, like, am I high energy or low energy today? Do I feel really I can't say the word locucious. Look, the word is not here. It's so annoying. I can see it. I can like almost feel it. I can't say it. Do I feel really like speaking a lot, or do I not? Whatever that is, it doesn't, right now I feel a little tired. Always kind of feel a little tired, but like sometimes I'm just like ground into the dirt. And right now I feel actually pretty decent. But yeah, I appreciate it. I am a big fan of many of the people I know who are watching this. I always, kind of humbles me that people would listen to me blathering on about stuff. So thank you. as always, and 再见.